You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All righty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I am joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. We were just talking backstage. I was watching some college football rankings get rolled out. NFL camp is fully underway, so we're seeing some of the scares, some of the random stories that come out, like the Giants having a freaking haymaker wallop of a fight, their first padded practice. So a whole bunch of different things, lots of news coming out, good, bad, and indifferent, but it's getting there, guys. Like, I can taste it now. We are in draft season. Like, this is draft month, and teams are hitting camp, and it's so close, guys. I'm getting so stinking excited. I can't stand it.
See, I'm still I wasn't in Olympic mode until last week, and now I'm in full-blown Olympic mode. So, like, USA. Yeah, seeing all the reports come out of these NFL training camps is somewhat disheartening at times, because there's always camp casualties, and we're starting to see some of those fly out now. But also the hilarious, I think this season's best matchup will be Mike Zimmer versus his players and the COVID vaccine, because that is the funniest thing I've seen come out of training camp so far, how mad he is at his quarterback. So Mike Zimmer versus Kirk Cousins might be the best matchup we see all season.
Yeah, you might be right there. Guys, we do have a very special guest joining us tonight. We've got Mike Hicks from, you probably know him better as DropTheMikeFF over there on both Twitter and over there on Instagram. Mike, how we doing tonight?
Pretty good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Very excited to have you on. We had you on for the draft day live stream way back in April, and we finally get the chance to have you back on and chat with you some more. But what have you been up to since the last time we spoke to you, which was right around the NFL draft?
All right. So one of the big things is I am now a ranker for Going for Two on their website. I'm doing Dynasty, and I'm going to be doing weekly during the season. And it looks like I am also going to be on one of their shows during the season on Friday nights.
That is awesome, dude. Good for you. Going for Two guys. Those guys are a lot of fun. I enjoy listening to their show or shows as they, continue to pound the airwaves with all their awesome content. So that's awesome that you're able to do some stuff with them. So I know we were talking about this backstage, but one thing that, just trying to talk about for the listeners and just so that way they get to know you is how did you get involved in this fantasy football life?
All right. So fantasy football life, just like a lot of us, pandemic era, I'm sitting on the couch. I really didn't know too much about a lot. I heard about Scott Fishbowl, but I hadn't heard too much. It was too late to sign up. I got into the satellite, and I got a message saying, "Hey, does anyone want to write?" And I wanted to do writing when I was, coming out of high school, but it just nothing turned into being a journalist. Got a real life job and stuff like that. Started writing for the Pregame HQ and Elvin Ryan. And then about week 12, I jumped over for Going for Two with Jeff Lambert. And then in the offseason, that's when I became the lead Dynasty writer.
It's funny that you said that you got a real life job instead of becoming a journalist, because
I wish
I'm a journalist.
I wish I could have. I'm just saying I didn't. Where I grew up where I'm at in California, the junior college. This is why.
The funny thing is, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, well, I can't drive because I don't
totally
have my
agree
driver's license because I had epilepsy when I was younger, so I couldn't drive. And the nearest junior college is 45 minutes away. They didn't have a journalism program. The nearest junior college that did, 2 hours. So I had to suck it up and just, yeah.
Well, I will tell you from experience, you dodged a bullet. Mike, what is I know that we are into draft season, but just so again that we can get an idea for you, and you said kind of your experience there, but what's your favorite type of fantasy football to play? You know, we're in a bunch of different styles of leagues, but what's your favorite?
All right, so I'm more of a redraft guy. I honestly never played Dynasty till this last offseason. This is my first full year of the Dynasty cycle. So this offseason was pretty daunting because I'm like, oh, now I don't have to redraft my guys. These are the guys I got to keep. These are the guys I got to trade. Like my first ever Dynasty league that I got into, I know one of the guys that I'm in the league with is a friend of the show, JB Cho. He whooped me in the draft because I got halfway through my draft and went, oh no, my team's 30 years old. I'm done. I drafted it just like a redraft team, and then halfway through the draft went Matt Ryan, Tom Brady, Drew Brees. Those were my three quarterbacks, and this was last season. One is gone, one is going to retire, and one is on his way out. But I traded Ryan to JB.
Well, there you go. It's nice of him to help you out there. He's always good for a helping hand.
Yeah.
So as you're going through rankings and looking at when you're writing your content or when you're kind of studying up, like what are one or two guys that you really like this year, and then what are one or two guys that you're really kind of fading away from? You just don't think they're going to hit expectations.
All right, so the two guys I like, they're both running backs. One, you guys will probably maybe agree. One, I've been getting hate for. I love DeAndre Swift this year. I know some people don't with the whole thing going on in Detroit with Anthony Lynn, but if they can get him going, I like him and Antonio Gibson. But the one that I really like, and people are giving me a hard time, give me Myles Gaskin all year long. I don't know why, but I just have a feeling he's going to come out hot, and he's going to supplant everyone there and not give Dokes, not give Ahmed a time. And I'm not saying he'll do good, not necessarily a dynasty play, but in redraft, give me him all day long.
I'm a big fan of Gaskin, especially where you can get him ADP wise, to the point where I was scooping him up, pretty much everywhere I can, because you could get him a lot of times in like the 6th round and some of these things. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's where I drafted him in the Scotty Fish Bowl was in the 6th round, something like that, like super late. And I think you're right. I think he does have a lot of value and can easily kind of finish in that RB2. So Mike, we told the folks where they can get in touch with you a little bit there already. You're both on Instagram and Twitter. DropTheMikeFF is the handle there. But where else can the listeners and viewers connect with your work?
The major place right now, you know this, Derek, go over to the SportsMe app. I love that thing. Ask us questions, put up a battle. We can talk fantasy football. We can talk regular football, actually any sport. And I'm willing to talk about any sport, really. It doesn't just have to be football.
Love it. And Mike, you definitely had some folks chiming in when we first started. You had P2W Fantasy hopping in there saying that you're the man. B Witt 24, old Billy Witt with the fantasy first rounders saying, squad, what's up, fellas? Billy's a great guy. Make sure that you're following him as well. And then PD Stitz is saying go Bills, and we'll talk about the Bills here in just a little bit. But before we get there, you were talking a little bit about the SportsMe, and coming at you now, we're going to go to the SportsMe Spicy Take.
All right, who went Josh Allen injury? I'm going to go opposite. I'm going to say Josh Allen leads the Bills in rushing this year. RB1, Josh Allen.
Yo, Derek, what's good? It's your boy, Run Boys Robbie, the Run Boys Fantasy Network. Shout out to all the good old boys, the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. My spicy take to land on the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. No regression, Stefon Diggs game. He's probably going to land as wide receiver 1 when it's all said and done, especially with Vanilla Vic. Josh Allen, the stallion, throwing the rock to him and slinging that thing. So you already know I'm rolling with the homie Josh Allen, or I'm rolling with the homie Stefon Diggs to end as wide receiver 1. Let's go.
So definitely some cool little things going on there with the SportsMe and all of that good stuff. So if you guys haven't had a chance to check it out, hop over there, give it a look, see what you can. Like Mike said, we're always over there. We're doing some battles. This is one that we post every week where, we're saying, give us your spicy takes for the teams. And so it's definitely some really cool things going on there and some good things going on there. But we're going to go ahead and head over into the Bills, and we're going to start with the running back room where we always do. And they've got a guy coming into his second year. Zack Moss finished running back 45 last year, 112 rush attempts, 481 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. Had a little bit of work through the air, 14 receptions on 18 targets, 95 yards, 1 touchdown through the air. Guys, what are your thoughts on Zack Moss?
He should be the guy who kind of takes over as far as the backfield goes. He's built to be able to handle a better workload than Singletary is. But ultimately, I tend to agree. The Bills may not want Josh Allen to be RB1 on this team, but there is a better than likely shot that by the time this season's over with, Josh Allen's going to be RB1. So Zack Moss is a guy that you can get super late, 10th, 11th round. And if you're looking just to fill out some depth, he's not a bad piece. I do think they're going to use him a bit more in the red zone to try and save Josh Allen, but he's not a guy that is going to be able to kind of carry a safe floor. There's going to be some weeks where he just puts up duds, and then there's going to be probably 1 or 2 other weeks where he manages to fall in the end zone twice in 1 week and land, inside of, RB15. And if you have him in DFS that week, you're probably going to cash out. If you don't, then he's probably just going to sit on your bench the rest of the season.
So I'm going to preface this analysis with the fact that I had last year a team with both Zack Moss and Devin Singletary. And it seemed like every week I picked the wrong one because I didn't want to have both of them in at the same time. So I hate both of them. That is my take, is that I hate both of them because I was getting screwed over every week by the wrong one. Zack Moss, the spicy takes that we had there, I wouldn't be surprised if Josh Allen, like, to me, when I heard that wasn't all that spicy to me if Josh Allen is RB1 for the Buffalo Bills, because they just don't have a consistent running game other than 17 back there. So Zack Moss is a frustrating player. He is worth a late flyer just for some insurance on your team. But yeah, mostly in DFS is where Zack Moss will get his run. And that's, you're just going to be waiting. A best ball DFS is going to be your best bet.
Yeah, I completely agree with Kevin and Alex. DFS is probably the only place I will ever play him. I probably won't even own him. The thing that I will say is he is going to be I think he'll get a couple more touches in the red zone. Yes, Josh Allen, I think, will be their leading rusher, their number one rusher. He's definitely it's going to be Josh Allen inside the 5. But if they want to take a little bit of more pressure off Josh and that the defenses are going to stack the box knowing that Josh is going to run, they might try to give the ball to Zack a little bit knowing that Josh is going to be the play.
Yeah, that very well could be. I'm kind of right there alongside with you guys, but one of the interesting things that, just kind of thinking back to this offseason and some of the narratives rolling out there, is a lot of folks on how hyped they were over Cam Akers before the injury. A lot of folks down on Zack Moss and this Buffalo Bills entire running back room. And one of the interesting things was when you look at production wise last year, Cam Akers, Zack Moss, very similar rookie years. Obviously different offenses, different systems there, but it's one of those that just how interesting the narrative becomes for these guys as we approach the next season off of, that late stage breakout versus a guy that puts up the same type of numbers throughout the season. So I think what you saw last year, you're going to see more of the same. I think you're going to see Josh Allen vulture a bunch of those touchdowns to the point where it's going to render Zach Moss ultimately pretty fantasy irrelevant there, and is going to be a spot start week to week based on a matchup type of thing, or, if you're desperate for a flex type of play. So let's go ahead and we'll head on over to Devin Singletary, who finished as running back 34 last year, 156 attempts, 689 yards, 2 touchdowns, 38 receptions on 50 targets for 269 through the air. Guys, your thoughts on Devin Singletary?
Singletary, it's a lot like Zach Moss. Where Singletary has slightly more value is the Bills seem more confident in his ability to catch out of the backfield. So if you're in a full point PPR for running backs, Singletary will carry a little bit of a tick of extra value. If you're in a half point or just a standard league, Singletary has absolutely zero relevance for me. I don't think that they're going to use him inside the 5-yard line. So that kind of takes away, your touchdown upside. And more often than not, what we've seen from Josh Allen in this Bills offense is the check down is the absolute last resort, even after Josh Allen taking off and running with the ball. So, he had 30 receptions last year. Could he get up to 35, 37? Maybe. Depends on how they're trying to add some wrinkles to the offense, but he doesn't do it, guys. 2 years ago, he was the rookie to have, right? Like, everyone thought Devin Singletary was going to come in and just take it by storm, and it didn't really happen. And then last year, they're like, well, they drafted Zach Moss, but Devin Singletary is the guy. Devin Singletary, through the first half of last year, averaged a snap count percentage of about 72% of the snaps he was on the field for last year, the first half of the season. Now, Moss was a little dinged up and everything else, but once Moss was healthy, guys, this was a true split backfield. Both of them had about a 47% snap share. Neither one of them did anything wild and wonderful. Singletary saw a couple more targets his way in the passing game, but it didn't translate to anything. Total points through the back half of the season, Moss actually outscored Singletary. So even with those receptions, it didn't add up because Singletary is not falling into the end zone. And it's just a situation that I'm really going to try to avoid. There's just when we're talking that late, there's other players that have some more upside that I can take a flyer on that I feel like could add true value to my fantasy team that neither one of these Bills running backs are really doing for me.
Cosign.
Mike, any thoughts on Devin Singletary?
Besides the cosign, I feel the pain on this one. I probably have him in close to 40% of my dynasty rosters. And I thought, not because I love him, but I got him where I had to. And I agreed with what Kevin said. The narrative was that when they drafted Zach Moss, people still thought Singletary was going to be the lead back. And that first part of the year, he was, like Kevin just said, he was getting the shares, the target, the snap percentage. But then it was a 50-50 shot. But the one thing I want to add, I am a little bit worried. I don't want a part of either of this backfield. But how much is Matt Breida going to get a run in the passing game on third down too? He's not going to a lot. He's going to get a little bit enough to scare some people even further away.
You're eating into my spicy take here for the Buffalo Bills. And since you opened that can of worms, I'm going to jump right on inside. Matt Breida will lead the Buffalo Bills in rushing touchdowns this season. There's a spicy take for you.
There you go. That is a little spicy. A little spicy there. What is interesting is actually these two guys are going almost back to back in drafts right now. When you look at it, you have Zach Moss going at running back 37 off the board. Devin Singletary going as running back 38 off the board. Is there any chance when it gets down there that you guys are taking the shot on either one of these guys? You have a couple of guys behind them being drafted just a couple of running back spots behind that, and Gus Edwards and Nyheim Hines. Any chance you guys are taking a shot on Zach Moss or Devin Singletary with that ADP?
As an absolute last resort, maybe. Like, I'd really have to talk myself into it. After the year that I had with those two last year, it's 1,000-foot pole with me and these two running backs.
I'd say no. There's too many other guys that I'd rather have a small piece of, depending on what's going on. Nyheim Hines is the guy that you referenced. It'll be interesting to see how long Carson Wentz is down and what that's going to do for Jonathan Taylor and the dynamic. But that Colts backfield, yes, Taylor's kind of the headliner, but Marlon Mack is still a real deal in that offense, and Nyheim Hines is still the pass catching specialist. So he's the guy that I'd rather have. Philip Lindsay is the guy that I'd rather have. Like, he's a guy who's kind of quietly being avoided because he went to Houston, and no one really knows what's going on in that Houston backfield. I think Philip Lindsay's going to end up being kind of that lead back in Houston by the time the season's done and over with. So if I can wait an extra round, and instead of grabbing Singletary or Moss, I can then grab Latavius Murray or Philip Lindsay, I'd rather wait that round and grab Latavius Murray or Philip Lindsay, because I think that their overall upside will at least give me a safer floor to play if injuries strike my team or bye weeks hit in a certain way, whatever that looks like. And you never know if Lindsay becomes the lead back, you get him in the 10th round. There's some trade fodder, guys. If you're trying to upgrade at a position, whether it's tight end, wide receiver, whatever that looks like, everybody's looking for a starting running back. So you can step in and help elevate your team that way when you're getting a pretty bargain deal when you're talking 10th, 11th round.
Yeah, I completely agree with Kevin on the Lindsay take, but I know you just mentioned him in the lead up, Derek. I am taking Gus Edwards over both of them. No questions asked.
Yep, I think I'm right there with you. When you're getting in that ninth round is about where you're talking. There's a lot of other guys that I would rather go than either one of these deals. So I think I'm right there with you guys. Any other thoughts on this Buffalo Bills running back room? Alrighty, let's go ahead and we're going to head on over into the wide receiver room, and they are headlined by this guy, Stefon Diggs, coming over from the Vikings last year in that trade, having really a season that even the folks saying that he was going to do well in this offense, I don't think they even projected him to do this well. Finishing as wide receiver number 3, 127 receptions, 166 targets, 1,535 yards, 8 touchdowns, had over a 29% target share out there in Buffalo. Guys, your thoughts on Stefon Diggs?
That target share is the stuff that wide receiver 1 wet dreams are made of, right? Like, that's what you want to see when your quarterback's dropping back and they don't have a running game, as we just said. Like, I want the guy who's going to be the focal point of their passing attack, and that is clearly Stefon Diggs. The one thing that I would like to see improve is I'd like him to be able to find a way to fall into the end zone a little bit more, but I think 8-9 touchdowns is probably about his cap. Not only the way that the team is built, but how they're utilizing Diggs, and he does a little bit of run after the catch, but a lot of his stuff was deep outs or deep ins, right? And it wasn't a whole lot of yak. He just had the air yards behind it, which really helps. So don't get me wrong, it all adds up, but the only downfall is I'd love to see him get double-digit touchdowns and kind of step up to that Devontae Adams level or DeAndre Hopkins level of, annual touchdown expectations. But I think 8 or 9 is pretty well it. So it's the one reservation for me. But outside of that, if you're drafting him as your wide receiver 1, you can be confident in that. Like, he is well worth the bill of being your wide receiver 1 on your fantasy team. It's not something that you have to sit back and ponder week in and week out. The negativity that he had leaving Minnesota has kind of completely been washed away. Like, he redeemed himself. He stayed out of the headlines. Like, he supported his quarterback. He didn't get in the scuffs, and he became the guy that the Bills gave up all that capital for and kudos to them because they made the right call, and Diggs is a guy you can absolutely sign off on.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a guy who needed a change of scenery, and it was a good move for all parties, I think, when that happened. That Stefon Diggs got out of Minnesota, went to Buffalo. A little foreshadowing to what we have coming up later in the show. I have Stefon Diggs as wide receiver 2 this year. I don't see the drop-off in production. As long as Josh Allen is his quarterback, Stefon Diggs is going to be a force to be reckoned with in this league. Because they have such great chemistry. Allen is looking for him, which is great. You mentioned the targets and Diggs obviously showed that he could be a wide receiver 1, even in an offense in Minnesota that had a 1,000-yard receiver opposite of him. And I would say a downgrade in quarterback, at least throwing the deep ball, which is what Stefon Diggs really thrives in. So he gets the upgrade in the quarterback that's not afraid to throw the deep ball over there in Buffalo, and a guy that is looking his direction. So I like Stefon Diggs. I have a feeling that there would be a lot of times where I wouldn't be in a position to grab him. But if I ever did, I would hit draft and move on.
Yeah, I completely agree with Alex. A lot of times in my draft style, especially in redraft, he's not there when I want to draft a wide receiver. But if that was my style, I'd be hitting that smash all day long. And anyone that has him outside their top 5 in redraft rankings is absolutely crazy, in my opinion, which we will talk about later. But it's just, yes, the opportunity's there. I want to touch on one thing that Kevin said about the touchdown situation. I think that's part of the reason I think that, and I agree with him. I agree with Kevin that I would like to see a little bit more than 10, 11 touchdowns a year. But part of the problem is when you get tackled inside the 5-yard line, they're going to hand the ball out. They're just going to give the ball to Josh and let it go. Where some of the other wide receivers are getting targeted from the 5 in the end zone, like Devontae and D-Hop and guys like that. Once it gets to the 3, 4, 5-yard line, they're not even throwing the ball. And that's the issue.
Yeah, you're not kidding, because when you look at it last year, he had 3 targets inside the 5 zone, right? You expand that out to the 10 zone, 6 targets there, and really only saw an additional target from the red zone in, so the 20-yard line and in. And all those touchdowns came from longer touchdowns when they got into the red zone there. But part of the reason, right, like, raised my hand on your crazy for your take there. 37.5% of Stefon Diggs' touchdowns last year came on one game, right? He had 8 touchdowns, 3 of them coming in week 16, where he finished as the wide receiver number 2 overall in the week. Now, it was one of those that he definitely got better as the season rolled along and as that chemistry developed with Josh Allen, and you saw a lot of that come to fruition over the back half there. But for a guy to be up there in that elite level of wide receiver, that top 5 or better, I see him needing to get into 10 plus touchdowns on that, and I don't see that happening this year. Is part of the reason that he fell down below that ranking for me. I definitely see him as a top 10 guy. I don't necessarily see him as a top 5 guy, but if you have him in a keeper league and you have the ability to have that draft capital penalty type of thing, like, that is a fantasy gold mine right there, because you're spent, in most leagues last year, it was a 6th or 7th round pick that you're able to get as a keeper, and to get an elite top 10 type of receiver for a 6th round pick is absolutely insane. And that was a league winning type of move that a lot of folks were able to do last year with Stefon Diggs.
I think the one thing that does set Diggs apart from a couple of the other guys who are kind of consensus top 5, 6 wide receivers are he has a much safer floor. Calvin Ridley, a lot of people, and us included, have him inside the top 5. He is the only show in town. That Atlanta team's going to be pretty terrible on defense. Like, you expect them to be throwing the ball around the yard. But we have seen Calvin Ridley lay absolute duds where he just disappears. And to this point, we have not seen Stefon Diggs do that. He averages his 10 targets a game. Yes, his touchdowns, he had 3 of them in week 16. But depending on how you're choosing to build your team, right? Risky or risk averse, right? I think that's where you can slide Diggs in and be confident with the floor that I know this guy's going to see 9-10 targets a game come hell or high water. And yes, there's only a probably 42% chance or whatever it is that he falls into the end zone that week. But if he's catching 8 of 11 for 112 yards, and that's going to be consistent, the targets and the volume at some point outweigh the touchdowns.
No, you're right. He finished as the consistency ranked number 2 wide receiver last year. So definitely some excellent points there on the floor and getting the consistency out of it, which out of the wide receiver position is typically a tough road to hoe right there.
And I know we're going to cover him here in a bit, so I'm not going to get too far ahead of ourselves, but Tyreek, where'd his consistency ranking fall, Derek? Do you have that in front of you by chance? Because he's another guy who a lot of people have top 3, definitely inside the top 5.
He was number 1.
He was number 1. Okay.
Number 1 in consistency last year.
I would have lost that. If we were on a game show, I would have just lost us $1 billion because I never would have told you that Tyreek was the number 1 consistent wide receiver.
I remember us talking about something like that last year when we were talking on a Tyreek take during the season, and his consistency was up there. So I would have saved us from you losing us $1 billion there, but it would have only been like, half of that probably.
Kevin, I'm on your side and I'm wearing the hat and I'm still.
It helps when you have 200 yards and 7 touchdowns against Tampa Bay in the first half of the regular season. So that helps with some of that
performance.
It was amazing.
Yes. All righty. Well, guys, any other thoughts on Stefon Diggs? All righty. So, like we said, with that target share, the Bills are very focused on one wide receiver there, which leaves a smaller piece of the pie on a couple of other other receiving options here. But we're going to run through them. Emmanuel Sanders, new to the team, coming over. He finished as wide receiver 43 last year, 61 receptions, 82 targets, 726 in the yards, 5 touchdowns, had a 16% target share down there in New Orleans last year. Guys, your thoughts on Manny Sanders coming to the Bills?
It's a sneaky play. I liked Manny Sanders when he was in Denver, obviously, that veteran leadership that he provided. Then when he went to San Francisco, I was like, I kind of like him there as well. And then when he went to New Orleans, I was like, yeah, it just makes sense. It's a guy who can find himself open. So it's a sneaky play. I think wide receiver 43 is probably that's about right where I would have him. I only went 36 out, but I think that it's a sneaky play and it could pay dividends if you get on a week where there's a good matchup, because him opposite of Stefon Diggs, he runs and really it's not opposite because he kind of runs a different route combinations than what Diggs does. So I think it's a sneaky play. It's something to keep your eye on as your draft starts to unfold, because if he's there and it's at the right time, you could get him, and I think you'd be happy having him on your roster. If for nothing else, he doesn't screw you over when you go up against him on somebody else's team.
I think Emmanuel Sanders is going to be a very nice security blanket for Josh Allen as teams continue to slide more coverage over to Diggs and try and limit their ability to just feed him the ball again 9, 10, 11 times a game. Emmanuel Sanders is very, very good at creating space and coming down with the football in tight windows when he has to, right? He is the ultimate guy to give up his body for the play. Like he really is a team first guy. We saw it in Denver. He did the same thing when he was in San Francisco, did the same thing in New Orleans. He's going to do the same thing in Buffalo, guys. Like he's good for the locker room. He brings a passion and a fire about him that the team can rally around. He has no problem going over the middle. He will sacrifice his body to come down with that. And with them not having a real tight end option and having a wide receiver like Emmanuel Sanders willing to go across the middle and kind of occupy that territory of the field, he's going to have a couple games where he's going to see elevated protection because teams are just going to be so dead set on doubling Diggs all game long. They don't trust no one's scared of the running attack. So if you're rolling coverage over to Diggs, that leaves things in the middle of the field open. I think Beasley's probably on his way out of town. They just can't all seem to get along. And so I think Manny Sanders and Gabe Davis are going to kind of dominate those wide receiver touches. But I like Emmanuel Sanders. I think that ranking, again, is probably about right. Like I could see him finish anywhere from 30 to 50. And we're talking when it's all said and done with, we're probably talking about the grand scheme of 35 points as far as fantasy goes, spread out over 17 weeks. But there is that range there. The 4 or 5 touchdowns feels about right. And I think he might be the one reason that Diggs can get in the end zone more often, because if he keeps eating in the middle of the field, as soon as those safeties kind of cheat up and the Bills can figure out the route concepts to get Diggs in behind that, it's going to create a lot of big play potential for the Buffalo Bills. So I like Manny Sanders, but he's my wide receiver 4 or 5 on my team. He's a guy that, this looks right. He's a safe play, and I don't like the other options around me.
Yeah, I mean, the only things that I need to add to this, because everything's been said, is he's consistent at what he does. He does all the little things right. And a team like Buffalo that is that far away from, going over the hump and being a championship team, they need a player in the locker room that is the opposite of Cole Beasley right now. And, he does all the things right. And the other thing I want to add is the Saints would really like to have him back right now.
Yeah, I'm sure they would. Looking at it, Emmanuel Sanders, I think at this point in his career, is much better for actual NFL football than he is necessarily for fantasy football. And I say that from looking at just last year when he was doing that. I see a similar production, like Kevin said as well, and I see that coming in similar kind of fashion to it. Whereas last year, if you played him, there was 2 weeks that you would have been happy to have him in your starting roster. One was in week 5, where he finished as the wide receiver number 11. The other one was in week 17, which for most fantasy players, you're not playing in that, because that typically came the week after championship weeks. The rest of the weeks, he was wide receiver 3 or worse when it came to fantasy, right? Like outside of those 2 weeks, his next top finish was wide receiver 25, had a couple of like 27s, 30s, some of those types of things. So it was one of those that if you were put him in as a flex option for your roster, there were probably other options that would have suited you better to do. And where he's being drafted at right now is coming off the board at like wide receiver 80, like it's buried on ADP. He's a guy that will go undrafted in a lot of fantasy rounds. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave him, is kind of in that undrafted realm, and be looking for him maybe on the waiver wire, things like that, as we start to see how his role is going to be in this Buffalo Bills offense. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll head on over to Gabriel Davis. Gabe Davis was wide receiver 54 last year, 35 receptions, 62 targets, 599 through the air, 7 touchdowns, and just under an 11% target share. Guys, your thoughts on Gabriel Davis?
This is your replacement for a lack of tight end. He is your big-bodied receiver that Josh Allen looks for in the end zone. Gabriel Davis does a good job of high pointing the ball and really just creating separation in a tight window inside the red zone. Like he seems to have a knack for it. And some guys have that ability and some guys don't, but this is where Gabe Davis comes in. Is, there's a lot of debate on who's going to be the true number 2. Is it Sanders or is it Gabriel Davis, and kind of back and forth. But Gabriel Davis, for me, is very intriguing at times because much like Emmanuel Sanders, he kind of gets lost. He's just buried down on the ADP chart. A lot of people skip over him. If you're not as fantasy versed, I guess I'll say it that way. You kind of look at that name and go, I don't even know who that guy is. And you just kind of skip over him because people don't really talk about him. But I mean, hell, when 20% of your catches are touchdowns, you need to pay attention to him a little bit because he finds a way to get open. And when he gets open, there's a really good chance he's going to score 6. So he's not a bad guy to have as a deep depth piece, or at least kind of flag on your watch list. You know, if something happens, if Emmanuel Sanders goes down, right? If they cut Cole Beasley, you know, Gabe Davis stock goes up. Like, so he's a guy that I definitely have my eye on. I'm not, you know, hunting him down in the top 10 rounds, but getting later in the draft, especially if you're drafting closer to, you know, the season kickoff and you understand what these rosters are looking like, he's a guy I have a star next to. I'm going to make sure I know where he is on my draft board and the total draft board to try and make a decision on him at some point.
Yeah, he's my favorite guy besides Josh Allen on this offense. I love Gabe Davis. I liked him out of UCF. I get what Kevin's saying about putting him on your watch list or having, you know, him as a star next to your name just in case something happens with Beasley. I know we're mainly talking redraft, but I have a lot of shares of him in Dynasty, and he's one of those guys you stash at the end of your bench and play him when you can.
Yeah, that was one of those that gave, for Dynasty purposes, right there when the news broke that John Brown was not going to be retained, and right before Emmanuel Sanders was signed, if you could have moved Gabe Davis during that like 3-hour window, you would have gotten a huge return on that investment there. Good job. So it is a guy that he is that big body type of receiver, and I'm not going to beleaguer that point because Kevin made it very well. And it's a guy that I think will have a lot of run in this offense. And when I say a lot of run, you might see him get up there and tick up to maybe a 14% target share type of thing. But make no mistake, the offense is going to run primarily through Josh Allen's legs and then through the air with Stefon Diggs, which makes some of these other guys down here a little tough to draft. But where he's going at, when you're talking wide receiver 64 off the board at an overall pick of 172, you're able to throw that dart with kind of that last pick in most drafts. And that's a guy worth throwing a dart on, a guy that, you know, could have that breakout type of year towards it, and, you know, worth seeing what's there for it. Any other thoughts on Gabriel Davis? Alrighty, guys, let's go ahead and move on over. We talked about Cole Beasley a little bit. Finishes wide receiver 26, 82 receptions, 107 targets, 967 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 18.77 on the target share. Thoughts on Cole Beasley?
Cole Beasley's stats split out between Emmanuel Sanders and Gabriel Davis look very nice. My biggest concern about him is his contention with his own team. Like, there's a lot of infighting, and it's all regarding the vaccine. And it's such, you know, I'm going to do my best to not get any bit of political thing on about this, but it's such a polarizing topic. And the people who are for the vaccine think the people who aren't for the vaccine are just batshit crazy. And the people who aren't for the vaccine think the people who are for it are batshit crazy. And there's really no moving anybody off of that needle at the moment. And it's across the country for lots of different reasons. But Cole Beasley, right, wrong, or indifferent, has stated his case, and pretty eloquently for the most part. This last round, I think he kind of got a little cuckoo about some things, but he's trying to talk about it. Like, he was trying to have open dialogue about it. And some of his teammates are firing back because of the NFL stipulations that are going down, because of if non-vaccinated players, you know, create this outbreak within the team. And then they're talking about if you're not able to play and players are losing game checks and all the things, right? So it all goes back to money. And I understand that these guys only get 18 paychecks a year. Now, they're paid very well, especially compared to, what the average Joe is making for those 18 paychecks a year, but it's their livelihood. So if they can get past this and Cole Beasley stays on this team, he does a great job being that slot receiver and being able to get those scat yards. And when Diggs is covered, that was the check down instead of the running backs that we were talking earlier. It was Cole Beasley. If they cannot get past this and the team decides to part ways for whatever reason, 102 targets and 18% target share is a lot to get split up between Manny Sanders and Gabriel Davis. So pay attention to what Cole Beasley's roster status is when you're drafting, because if he's not there, guys, I think more so Gabriel Davis than Emmanuel Sanders, like I said, their stock's going up. So I'm watching Cole Beasley to make sure he's still on the Buffalo Bills when I'm drafting. And if he's not, I will be adjusting on the fly, and I will be grabbing Gabe Davis a couple rounds earlier now, because I think that's where most of that volume would go if Beasley's not with the Bills.
Yeah, personally, I don't have much to say about Beasley except for the fact that my personal belief right now is I think he's not going to be on the team on opening day. I think the rift in the locker room has already been made too much for him. Excuse me, for him to get back that. And I just have a gut feeling that he's on his last days on the team.
Alex, any thoughts on Cole Beasley?
I think I think Mike is he's where my head is at. I don't think that Beasley's going to be on the team. I think that it's just too deep of a divide, and sometimes, I don't want to say that this is a similar situation, but Stefon Diggs had to get out of Minnesota because he created such a divide between him and his teammates. They had to move on from him. And the problem with Cole Beasley is that there's not many people that would be willing to throw down what the Bills threw down to get him. So he might want to tread carefully. Otherwise, he'll be out of a job.
So from a fantasy perspective, I don't know that I was going to be looking at adding Cole Beasley onto any of my rosters this year. He had he's got an ADP of the 45th wide receiver off the board. There's a lot of other options out there that I'd rather go with. I think that he had a unique situation last year in Buffalo where when John Brown went down due to injury, the Bills were kind of left going, well, how are we going to run this offense? Dawson Knox did not take the step forward that people thought that he was going to last year. Gabe Davis really didn't start to emerge, until a little bit later into the season. So you saw Cole Beasley, get a lot of those PPR type of points and all of those short targets, those short check down type of things, like we've already said. And I think that was a little bit of a perfect storm for him, a little bit more so than something that's going to be repeatable going forward this year.
If there needed to be another reason, the Bills save about $5.3 million if they cut Cole Beasley.
There's also that too. Guys, any other thoughts on this wide receiver room? All righty, let's go ahead and head over to the tight end room. Not much to talk about here, but we're going to hit up some guys. Dawson Knox finished his tight end 36 last year in really kind of a disappointing season where folks thought he was going to be kind of that, have that breakout. Only 24 receptions on 44 targets, 288 yards, 3 touchdowns. Any thoughts on Dawson Knox?
Really, no. He's not a guy.
There's so many other tight end options.
Yeah. You want to talk about tight end carousels and streaming tight ends? Like, he's a guy that I'm happy not drafting. And then if for some reason Josh Allen shows an affinity to throw to Dawson Knox and he starts racking up, touchdowns and consistently sees, 5-6 targets and 4 catches a week, then I'll look at him. But on draft day, I'm looking other places.
Yeah, streaming option at best.
Gotcha. So it sounds like hard pass is the consensus. Let's go ahead and talk about the other tight end in the room. Jacob Hollister coming over from Seattle. He had, tight end 38 season last year, 25 receptions, 40 targets, 209 through the air, 3 touchdowns. Any thoughts on Jacob Hollister? Are you looking to put him on any of your rosters?
Does my league start 3 tight ends?
Even if it does, I don't know that I'm putting him on there, even with a third tight end start.
Yeah, I don't. The question I have for you guys is, do you think there's, and this could play into it with if Beasley saves the $5 million or whatever, do you think there's a chance that Zack could still be a Buffalo Bill, or do you think that has gone out the window?
I think there's always still a chance, right? Like, I mean, the Bills could decide that they really don't like what they have there and they want to bring something in, but I haven't seen anything out of the Bills' offensive concepts that says we need a tight end to be a focal point, right? Like if you have Cole Beasley, ready to run those underneath routes, and if you have Emmanuel Sanders ready to do kind of those intermediate middle of the field routes, and then you have Diggs willing to go up over the top, like between those guys, and Gabe Davis is obviously in there for the big body in the end zone. Like between those 4 guys, you kind of have the makeup of what you're using a tight end for in a lot of offenses anyway. So I think a lot of it was fan fodder. Like maybe if you could have got him cheap, like a 5th round pick or something, but the Eagles were never going to give up Zach Ertz for that. So never say never, but it's pretty dim.
Like the Bills weren't a tight end away from winning the AFC Championship last year, so there's no need to do anything like that to bring him in.
Alrighty. Well, let's go ahead and head on over to the the quarterback room. And Josh Allen put up a season last year, finished as quarterback number 1, 396 completions, 572 attempts, 4,544 yards, threw 37 touchdowns to only 10 interceptions. Also used his legs quite a bit, 102 rush attempts, 421 yards for 8 touchdowns on the ground. Guys, your thoughts on Josh Allen?
QB1, man. He has the easiest path to repeat at QB1. I think as any quarterback in the NFL, even probably an easier path than Mahomes, because Allen will run the ball a bit more. They don't have a running game. They don't really seem to like using their running game. And I don't think I think if you're drafting him and he's not the first or second quarterback off the board, you're playing with a bunch of guys who don't know what they're doing.
Make sure that's a money league.
No doubt, right? Like the path is there. The path is just there. So I like Josh Allen. If he can continue to keep his completion percentage high and possibly even improve it, that's even better for the Buffalo Bills. Those 8 touchdowns, even if it backs down to 6, I think you're still right there because of the extra game that they're playing this season anyway. Like you could see Josh Allen flirt with 5,000 yards passing in a season. Like I think you can see him flirt with that. And if everything holds up from last season and the consistency, you're looking at 40, maybe just over 40 passing touchdowns. So hell yeah, QB1, guys. Like if you're wanting to draft a quarterback early, he's definitely right there at the top of the list.
I had him as QB2 behind Mahomes, who we'll talk about later, but that's strictly only because he just didn't have as many weapons as, he is his own weapon when it comes to fantasy football for him and his stats. But Kevin, you brought up a fun thing that I think we should go around the room with here. What's more likely this year, Josh Allen throwing for 5,000 yards or rushing for 500?
Yeah, give me the 500.
Rushing for 500.
Yeah. I think there's too much variable, and there's no one there to take the carries away from him. There's so much variable in the passing game.
You guys were a lot more convicted in that than I thought you would be, because just given his stats. But yeah, I think I would lean towards rushing for 500 yards as well.
5,000 yards passing just seems like
it's a
shit.
daunting task. Yeah, it's a lot. But that's where it's at. And yes, Josh Allen, I think you would be happy with him. I remember people thinking, it was going into last year that there were a lot of expectations put on him with how much he would run the football and throw, and he lived up to it. So I've got no reason to think anything different going into this season.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right there. And, it's one of those that he kind of lives up to that bill of, if a quarterback is going to run the ball, rush the ball over 100 times, he's going to have a great fantasy finish. And that was something that we knew going into last year. We were proven a little different thoughts that I think everybody had on him through the course of the season than what we had entering the season, where, it turns out he can complete passes at a high clip, right? Like, this was the guy that people were doubting that, could he take the next step because of the fact that, he had a hard time getting to 58% pass completion. And last year finished just below a 70% pass completion there as well. So yeah, there's some other guys out there that folks are talking about as far as could have a big breakout quarterback type of season, top 10 type of finish, and a guy just down the road in Philadelphia there with Jalen Hurts. And if he's going to do that, he would need to take that similar type of step forward like we saw Josh Allen take last year and get the completion percentage up. But I don't know that that's going to necessarily happen with some of those weapons going down like we've seen.
Well, and
guys,
it's 30 yards a game to hit 500 yards. Like,
yeah,
you start looking at that going, well, hell, like, I can see he's going to have a game or two where he scrambles one time and he ends up picking up 30 yards on accident, right? Like, that's just going to happen. So I think 500 yards is at least much more likely. It's easier to do.
Yes, absolutely. Guys, any other thoughts on the quarterback room or the Bills in general? All righty. Well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to head on over into the Kansas City Chiefs. And guess what, guys? We've got another SportsMe spicy take for the Chiefs.
What's up, bro? Please don't kill me for saying this, but Patrick Mahomes is not going to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback this season. Patrick Mahomes will most likely be the first quarterback drafted in many leagues for your fantasy scoring system. However, he's going to finish outside the top 5. I'll take guys like Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson. Hell, I won't even count out Tom Brady. So, right there, Pat Mahomes not top 5.
Well, Sauce Boss, I think you're fading Mahomes a little bit too much if you're putting him behind Russell Wilson and Justin Herbert. Maybe that's just me. And Derek, I don't have any spicy Chiefs takes. I think they are who they are. I expect the receivers, primarily Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, to put on a show, Mahomes to be good, the defense to kind of be all right, and for the backfield not to have a true star. I think we know what we have.
So there were some spicy takes for the Chiefs this time around.
I like my man saying he's not going to be in the top 5, and then he lists off 3, and then he's like, "Oh shit, I got to get 2 more."
So, guys, if you that is the SportsMe spicy take, and we always have a lot of fun over there on SportsMe. If you haven't downloaded that app, make sure that you do it. It's a ton of fun. Constantly on there, constantly doing battles, and you can see battles like that shape up and take hold there and have some fun with that. But guys, let's go ahead and start over here in the running back room. And you've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, running back 22 last year, 181 rush attempts, 803 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, 36 receptions on 54 targets for 297 and 1 through the air, just under a 9% target share for the passing volume. Guys, your thoughts on the CEH?
I'm grabbing him up everywhere I can get him. I really am. I'm just grabbing him up And I'm happy to take him at the middle to back half of the second round, and he can be my RB2 because I think this is the season he finishes inside the top 12 and is the running back that everybody drafted him to be last year. I see him touching close to 1,100 yards rushing. I think you're going to tack on another 600 yards receiving this season. Like, he is the true third option. They finally have a true third option for Patrick Mahomes, and it's being able to turn around and hand the ball off. Andy Reid loves workhorse backs. Injuries and I think a COVID year kind of played into some of the CEH downfall that people were frustrated about, but we called that, guys. Like, again, like we said, he's not top 8 material this season. We talked about that. This year, I think top 8 might be a bit of a stretch, but I can see him inside the top 12. And so for him, falling back, he's going about running back 14, 15, 16, depending on what league you're in and how they're drafting it. But I'm grabbing him all season long because he's my piece of the Chiefs offense. He's the cheapest piece of the Chiefs offense I can get. And I like that. I will be more than happy to spend second round capital on CEH and I think that it will deliver. I really do.
I think your qualifier there, Kevin, was very, very important because everybody wants a piece of this Chiefs offense. But CEH is going to be the cheapest piece out there. So if you're not willing to spend high capital, then CEH is the way you want to go. I've got him ranked 16 this year, and that might be a touch low. Recency bias might be playing into that a little bit in the probably unfair expectations we had because we were like, hey, CEH, he's going to this high-powered offense, and then it just wasn't quite what we thought it was going to be. But I think you're right, Kevin. If you want a piece of this Kansas City Chiefs offense, in order to get the cheapest piece, that is CEH, because everybody else is going probably a little bit sooner than you would be comfortable with.
One of my favorite teams that I've drafted through this offseason, I got Zeke in the first round, Austin Eckler in the second round, and CEH in the third. And I don't even know anything else about this team. Like, there's too many damn leagues, number one, but it's the only thing that I care about because I can sit back and just camp on the fact that I have 3 top 15 running backs and arguably 3 top 10 running backs on any given week. And I will let the cards fall where they will because I love running backs. And so when I can start a league out like that, the rest of my draft, everyone could say was a complete bust, but I will still have a fighting chance every single week because of those 3 guys.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of a super flex draft right now, and we got CEH in the middle of the third. Me and my partner, we went Dak, Antonio Gibson, and then CEH fell right into our lap in the third.
Ooh, I love it.
So
That's not bad.
Okay, as a Chiefs fan, I agree with what all you guys said about last year. As soon as everyone was like, he's going to be this top 10 running back and blah, 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 I went, no, he's not. He's going to be a rookie on this team. The expectations need to be limited. The one thing that drives me nuts about CEH, and this is just me being a Chiefs fan more than anything, every single time they gave him the ball in the red zone, I got scared because he only went 2 yards. He's not – but that's offensive line, too. I get that. That's completely offensive line.
Well, but my thing is, in his defense, he didn't have a true offseason to build that NFL frame.
No,
like he was bringing
agree.
in his LSU frame. And yes, the SEC does have a bit more offensive and defensive line prowess than a lot of other conferences. But I'm going to try and talk you off the ledge here for a second. He just didn't have a chance to get in the weight room. Like now that he's had this offseason to build that up, I fully expect that to be better. And within the first week, maybe 2 weeks, just depending on where the Chiefs are in the field, I fully expect them to just turn the ball and let him plow it into the end zone 2 or 3 times in the first 2 weeks and put all that hesitation to rest.
No, I completely agree because this is the thing. I think that's one of the reasons all of us like him at where he's going around RB 14 and 16 is exactly what you guys said about the recency bias. And because of all the stuff that he wasn't getting and the fact that they brought in Le'Veon Bell last year, everyone's looking him down upon that. Now there's no competition. Damian Williams is gone, who we thought was still going to be on the team. Le'Veon Bell's gone. You got Darrell Williams and Darwin Thompson. That's it. There is no competition. The ball is his, and they're going to give him the ball. They're going to use him like Shady McCoy and Westbrook did in Philly, and that's it.
I honestly thought that CEH was going to get benched in like week 2 after missing a blitz assignment. Like that was what I thought was going to happen. Just a rookie that's like, hey, we have a $500 million quarterback. You better block for him. But that didn't pan out the way I thought it would.
No. And when you look at it too, right? Like you guys have mentioned the offensive line, right? Like you talk about one of the big things that got exposed in Kansas City in a game that happened in February against Tampa Bay. That offensive line got exposed for, the holes that were there.
Yeah.
One of the things that they went out and did was drastically address that offensive line. They drafted Creed Humphrey to play center. That old boy can block out of Oklahoma. They also brought in Orlando Brown Jr., who also happened to be a Sooner. They don't have to block down there for the run game. They also brought in Joe Tooney. They've got a lot of they brought in a lot of pieces on that offensive line, and I think you'll see some of that help, and you'll see some of those big body bulldozers down there on that offensive line be able to move that a little bit so that you'll see more than a 2-yard run and through, to the point where if Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he doesn't even have to take a huge step forward into double-digit touchdown range for him to move drastically up the running back rankings there. If he finishes with 8-9 touchdowns on that would have drastically improved his ranking last year, which I see being able to be a possibility with that, right? We talk about touchdown regression. Well, there also happens to hold true with guys having touchdown progression. And I think that's where we're going to see CEH make his hay this year, is be able to get in there and move the ball a little bit when they get into that inside that 5-yard line. Any other thoughts on CEH?
Just one more thing. They also, I'm pretty sure they're getting back Duvernay Tardif, right?
Oh, yes, they are.
Back.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That was a pretty sizable hole to have to fill. And good on him for what he was doing and the decisions that he made last year. But yeah, that's a pretty that helps shore up a lot of things.
Right. You look at it, they brought in 4 offensive linemen to address that line this year, and all of those pieces I think will be able to make a big impact for both the pass game and the run game. All righty, guys, let's go ahead and move on over to the wide receiver room. And you've got Tyreek Hill showing up as wide receiver number 2 last year, 87 receptions, 135 targets, 1,276 yards, 15 touchdowns, 22% of the target share going to Tyreek Hill. Guys, your thoughts on the Cheetah?
Again, we'll talk about it later in the show, but I've got him ranked wide receiver 1. It's just he's on such a high-powered offense that has so many stressors for defenses that if you try to lock in on one, they're going to beat you with something else. So I see him as a wide receiver 1 candidate. I see him at finishing as wide receiver number 1 overall. But that's, again, the capital that you're willing to spend to get a player like that.
Yeah, Tyreek's just fun to watch. He's a fun guy to have on your fantasy team. Like, he's a guy that you can have and you're never quite out of the game, right? Like, at any given moment, Tyreek's going to catch one and shit, he's gone for 76, and I'm going to take the bonus yards, the touchdown, the 100-yard bonus that I got, because now all this other stuff's going on, and you go from being down 20 points to up by 15, and you're just sitting there laughing going, all I had to do is smash yes when I drafted him. Like, I like Tyreek. He's fun. The knee soreness, right? The report that came out yesterday, I believe, or today, one or the other. Sorry, my days are running together. With some of the knee soreness, they're well aware. They're going to take it cautious with him, right? That he doesn't need to be able to play today. He needs to be able to play in 4 weeks, as we get ready for the regular season. So I like Tyreek. I have no problem if that's who you want as your wide receiver 1. He's my wide receiver 2 personally, but that's, semantics at this point. So there's nothing wrong with Tyreek. Smash yes if you like drafting top receivers early, and know that Patrick Mahomes loves looking his way, and his ceiling is probably higher than any wide receiver, just because of his ability to take it to the house at any given point in time. But his floor, based off of last year, is much higher than what I would have told you coming into the 2020 season.
I can't believe I'm saying this as a Chiefs fan, but I actually don't have much more to say because everything's been said. He's a stud, hit draft, and watch your team score points, period.
Yeah. The only problem that I've got with Tyreek Hill is that he's not going to be able to be on many of my rosters just from the standpoint of how I draft. He right now is the 11th pick on average coming off the board, wide receiver number 1 coming off the board. It takes a whole lot for me to go anywhere other than a running back in the first round, unless it's super flex, in which case it's probably a quarterback. So there are going to be very, very few of my teams that Tyreek Hill is going to be on. But if that is your way of doing it, going kind of a 0 RB or taking a elite wide receiver to set that apart and get a positional advantage there, you should draft him and put him on your roster.
That does beg the question of, when in your draft do you maybe pivot from your RB first round, second round, and like what draft position are you in that you maybe pivot off of that?
I've yet to find one.
I know you
now. I can make the argument for it that 11 or 12. Now you could argue 10, right?
You're on the turnaround.
Yeah, somewhere close to that, because then it's format, it's scoring, it's how your league rules work, bonuses for this, that, and the other, like all the things that get added in, right? Like going back through and looking at Scott Fishbowl, I mean, all these running backs went early, but there's a legitimate argument for being able to take Travis Kelce first overall in the Scott Fishbowl. Like there's been articles written about it. There's been people talk about it. So the plan does not work across all formats. But where you continue to struggle, and I'm a proponent of this because there are only such a limited amount of running backs who are true 3-down workhorse backs. It just doesn't outweigh the upside of a receiver that sees 22 to 27% target share in a high power offense. Like, yes, it's really nice to have, but I feel like for me, that's a luxury pick. So that's why I always struggle to take that wide receiver, because I feel like I can get, 3 wide receivers in rounds 4, 5, and 6, if that's what I wanted to do. And my wide receiver room in general will be just fun.
Okay. So let's set the line this way. It's Tyreek. So running through, right? Nick Chubb is the last running back that's a consensus ADP over Tyreek Hill. So that then leaves Aaron Jones. Are you taking, stop me when we get there. I'm just going to go through the running back list there. Stop me when we get to it. So Aaron Jones.
Stop.
You take it.
I'll
Okay.
take Tyreek over Aaron Jones.
All right. So Alex is out. Mike, Kevin, tell me when we get to that point. Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, Antonio Gibson, Joe Mixon.
Stop.
Okay. So you're talking right there, running back 13th, 14th off the board right there, which then starts leading you into the J.K. Dobbins, the Josh Jacobs after that. So it sounds like for both of you guys that Joe Mixon is kind of that cutoff to it, which right now he has an ADP of 22. So you guys are looking to take your first wide receiver back there in the back half of the second, is about as early as that line would be for you.
Joe
Correct.
Mixon will not be in any of my lineups.
You will miss out, my friend. You will miss out on him this year.
He said this last year. I bought into his bullshit and it burned me.
That's okay. If I keep getting everybody to buy in and you get burnt, the year that it finally happens, I'm going to be the only one with him. So I'll take it. In fact, you just keep driving down his ADP for me. I appreciate that.
Gladly.
Well, guys, any other thoughts on Tyreek Hill? Alrighty, then let's go ahead and talk about the apparent wide receiver 2 on the team. That is Mecole Hardman, who finished wide receiver 58 last year, 41 receptions, 62 targets, 560 yards, 4 touchdowns through the air, about a 10% target share. Your thoughts on Mecole Hardman?
I am drafting him for best ball leagues and best ball leagues only. The Kansas City Chiefs' second wide receiver, no matter who it is, hasn't finished above wide receiver 53 in Andy Reid's tenure in Kansas City. I don't expect this year to change that. I expect Tyreek and Travis Kelce and CEH to dominate the workload offensively. And then it's going to be sprinkled in between Hardman, DeMarcus Robinson, Pringle, and what other cast of characters they trot out there for 2 catches and 36 yards.
I don't know if you know this, but from the time that we started this episode to right about now, Mecole Hardman had another 3 drops.
Oh,
I'm not taking him. I'm not taking him. I'm avoiding him.
All right, fantasy football, regular football, whatever you want to say, I ain't taking him. Here's my thing, even as a Chiefs fan, the thing that a lot of people forget about Hardman, to going back to his, when he got drafted, they drafted him not to be a complementary piece to Tyreek. They drafted him to replace Tyreek because that was the draft that they thought Tyreek was going to be out for off the field issues. They drafted a guy to replace him. Tyreek did not get suspended. And now you're looking at a guy who is a gimmick piece and a returner at best. I got something else to say about Hardman and the next player we're talking about, but I agree with Kevin and Alex. I am not drafting him. Maybe best ball, maybe not even there.
Yep, right there with you. Hard pass for me. At best, if he's there in the very last round of a draft that I'm at, I might throw a dart there, but even then, that temptation has sailed, just having done that with several other Chiefs receiving options, not named Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, that I'm just kind of done with that one. So, guys, let's go ahead and move on over to another receiving option in Kansas City, and that is DeMarcus Robinson, who finished wide receiver 71 last year, 45 receptions, 59 targets, 466, and 3 through the air. Your thoughts on DeMarcus Robinson?
This has Sammy Watkins written all over it again, right? Like, I could see Robinson coming out in week 1, having 3 touchdowns, and everyone smashing the waiver wire to try and get your piece of DeMarcus Robinson. And then he's going to have like 60 yards and maybe a touchdown for the rest of the season. Like, I just see it happening like this. So yeah, another guy, like, if I really want a piece of this offense, I'll do it in a best ball, but I'm not looking for him, targeting him, anything of that nature in a redraft league.
All right. I am not drafting him, but my Chiefs bold take, DeMarcus Robinson, WR2 for the season.
That is pretty bold. And not at the same time, because your wide receiver 2 has to get to like 500 yards and 47 receptions.
Exactly.
Alrighty, guys. Well, let's go ahead and move on over to the tight end room, where they've got a very fantasy relevant player, and that's Travis Kelce. Finished as tight end number 1 last year, 105 receptions, 145 targets, 1,416 yards, and 11 touchdowns through the air, just shy of a 24% target share. Guys, your thoughts on Travis Kelce?
If I were to ever pivot from drafting a running back in the first round, that is who it would be for. Outside of that, it really doesn't even matter to me the format. Like I really struggle to even take quarterbacks in the first round of super flex drafts. Like, but if I'm going to pivot from running back, it will be from that man, because there is such a gap between where Travis Kelce ends and the next guy even holds his jock strap in fantasy football that it's not even funny. So, take him in the back half of the first round. Congratulations. More power to you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you'd like the value, wait till the back end of the second round. Maybe you feel like value-wise, based off your draft position, Darren Waller does something for you there. But Kelce's such a beast. Holy crap, guys. Like, he's just doing things at that position that we didn't even fathom when Gronk was having his run with the Pats. Like, he is taking the best from Tony Gonzalez and Gronk and all these amazing tight ends. Shannon Sharp, thank you. And what all these tight ends did before him to kind of pave the way. And he's just taking it and saying, okay, now hold my beer and I'm going to show you kids how it's done. Like, it's just phenomenal. So I love Kelce. He's another guy who's fun to have on your fantasy team. He's a good personality. He's a great team guy. He's I don't know if he's won the Walter Payton Man of the Year award or if he's been nominated for it. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mike. So he's been nominated for that. So that speaks to his character off the field and what he does for the community. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with Travis Kelce, but I'm still going to struggle drafting him because I love my running backs so damn much.
Do yourself a favor and look up Travis Kelce's pizza commercial that he did last year. I think it was last year. It might have been the year before. It is worth every second of your attention because even what you're saying there, Kevin, like, the guy is such a character that even a pizza commercial for a local pizza chain in Kansas City, he made kind of fun. His positional value versus everybody else in that tight end group is worth alone. You're going to have the tight end one and a clear cut tight end one versus, we're trying to throw darts at some of these guys to figure out where they're going to finish in terms of a running back or a quarterback or a wide receiver. But when it comes to tight ends, you don't have to throw the dart because the target for tight end one for Travis Kelce is 10 feet wide, and then everybody else is minuscule on the side. So he is a game-changing player, and from the tight end position, it's unfair really that he's looped into tight end because he's better than a lot of wide receivers that are out there. And I mean, shoot, he had 11 touchdowns last year. And that's more than we were talking about with Stefon Diggs, who had 8, so it's just a wide margin between him and everybody else in that position group. And yeah, it would take a different draft strategy to get him on your roster. But if you do, you wouldn't regret it.
Yeah, I agree with everything everyone said. Obviously, he is one of my favorite players. I have his jersey right over there, but I'm probably not drafting him for the same reason that you guys have discussed. I'm realizing on the show tonight that I think a lot of the same ways that Kevin does. Me and his draft strategy is a lot alike. I go running back heavy, wait on wide receiver and tight end, so I wouldn't draft him. But watching him box guys out like they're on the basketball court for a freaking rebound and him just grab the ball and jump up and get it is just awesome. The other thing that I want to add is there's also, there's a lot of camp talk all over the league, but I saw something today that said that they're looking at sets with the rookie tight end Gray inside and putting Kelce on the outside. And if they did that, he's gonna dominate a freaking cornerback. He's just too big.
I love it.
Or if nothing else, they're gonna have to move a linebacker out there, and I mean he's still gonna be better than that, and that's gonna open up things for a guy that Kevin really would like to talk about.
Right. So it's interesting because when you look at it, right, we already talked about Stefon Diggs and how good he was and dominant for fantasy and all of those things, right? Travis Kelce put up more points per game last year for fantasy than Stefon Diggs. So if you were to look at this, you've got to kind of shape the lens a little bit different there. Travis Kelce scores up there in the elite level of what wide receivers do, which somebody already made that point. But when you look at it, the next closest our tight end last year was Darren Waller, and Darren Waller would have scored you right around, fringe wide receiver one type of territory. So there's a huge difference there. Just like when you're talking wide receivers, the difference there, same thing's going to hold true on the tight ends. And when you're talking on a tight end position, once you get outside of really those top 2, maybe 3 guys, there's a huge drop off there to the point where it comes down to, like we've said, for most of these teams, they become the touchdown dependent on these tight ends, where you're hoping that the tight end you draft falls into the end zone. So it's one of those that if you're not drafting Travis Kelce or Darren Waddle or potentially George Kittle, something like that, one of those top guys when in the tight end rooms, you need to wait on the position. But Travis Kelce is an absolute difference maker in the tight end space. Guys, any other thoughts on Travis Kelce or the tight end room in general?
So, the Chiefs drafted a young man by the name of Noah Gray. And Noah Gray is the number 2 tight end on the roster, obviously behind Kelce. But I want you guys to remember that name. If you're doing dynasty rookie drafts, I want you to grab him in the 3rd or 4th round, depending on how many rounds your rookie draft is. And if you're in a redraft, I want you to flag him, and you don't have to draft him just yet, but I want you to keep an eye on it, because Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs just continue to pump this guy up. Travis Kelce is saying nothing but good things. Andy Reid is saying nothing but good things. Eric Bieniemy is saying nothing but good things. Like, they have not pumped up a player coming into their organization this much since Patrick Mahomes. Like, Andy Reid he's not a gusher, right? Like, he says good things as he's kind of talking under his mustache and talking about wanting a cheeseburger and, the Andy Reid antics, right? But it's all fun and games, but they love this kid, guys. And if you're in any type of a dynasty format, while Travis Kelce is 33 years old, I believe.
I think he turns 32 during the season.
32, sorry. This is the heir apparent. They have drafted him, and this is the guy that they are going to groom to take that spot. Tight ends take 2 to 3 years to develop in dynasty anyway. And this is that next evolutionary step. So if you're in any type of a dynasty format, I want you to go out onto your waiver wire, and I want you to try and do whatever you can to make room for Noah Gray, because 2 or 3 years from now, we are going to be talking about him as the next best thing, because he will carry on with Patrick Mahomes' back half of the career the same way that Travis Kelce has been able to do for the front half of Patrick Mahomes' career. And you can get in front of it right now. Like, it's staring us right in the face. So this is my Noah Gray PSA, and I apologize, it's a little long-winded, but this allows you to get a leg up on your competition in a position that is extremely hard to draft and know what you're getting. This is going to help set you apart. And this guy, for all the talk around Kyle Pitts, who is amazing and is going to do different types of great things at the wide receiver position, Noah Gray might end up with better career statistical outputs because of the offense that he plays in and his quarterback over the course of his career.
All righty. I like it. Let's go ahead and finish up with the $500 million man here. Patrick Mahomes finishes quarterback number 4 last year, 390 completions, 588 attempts. That's obviously wrong.
His damn wristband's in the way, Derek. You're missing a 0 at the end, buddy.
Yep. Anyway, threw for a bunch of yards, had 38 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and really just had an overall great season like we've come to expect from from Patrick Mahomes. Ran the ball a little bit, 62 receptions, 62 rushing attempts, 308 yards, 2 touchdowns, and the yardage through the air. I'll circle back to that. The yardage through the air was 4,740 yards. Guys, your thoughts on Patrick Mahomes?
He did it while missing a game.
Yeah, he's not finishing outside of QB5 unless there's another injury that strikes him. If Patrick Mahomes is healthy, he's inside the top 5. And him and Josh Allen are the two quarterbacks that you can just check yes and move on. Like, the offensive philosophy is there. The weapons are there. The fact that he's in his prime is there. He'll use his legs when he has to. He throws no look left-handed behind the back passes. Like, he's another fun guy to have on your fantasy team. Like, I love Patrick Mahomes, and I hate that I love him because I'm a Broncos fan. But God, I love Patrick Mahomes. He's so much fun to watch. And it just pains me to know that the Broncos are going to get their ass beat another 20 times by Patrick Mahomes until his contract's even up. Like, that pains me, but golly, he's fun to watch.
I mean, we go back to the Super Bowl, and he made that pass where he's literally perpendicular to the ground. Nothing is touching the ground, and he makes that pass, and it should have been caught, but it wasn't. And it just, the guy is a magician out on the field. And the scary part was he didn't know how to read a defense until like 2 years ago. Like that was the weird thing that came out of that was he's like, I'm just going out there and playing. I don't actually like know what I'm doing. I'm just finding the open guy and hitting him. Like that's insanity. The guy is a game changer. He is going to be, I mean, he was QB4, but he missed the game last year. And you throw in another game's worth of statistics, and he's probably flirting with QB1 there. So I think QB1 is a safe bet there. There's no way that there are 5 quarterbacks that finish in front of him.
There's no way that there's
barring an injury.
Yeah, barring an injury, there's no way there's 3 quarterbacks that finish in front of him. To me, I know I'm a Chiefs fan, homer or not, he's a top 3 quarterback. Just like Alex said with the injury, I think he's a guy that will end up closer to 5,000 yards this year. With that offensive line, getting back, being protected, I think they're going to run more bootleg just to get him out in space, not to run the ball, past the line of scrimmage. But one of the best things they did was break down routes and stuff like that with Tyreek and Kelce. I think they're going to have more routes that are going to develop down the field with him to have more time. And that's just going to be godsend for the offense.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the fact that they've made those improvements on the offensive line will help him out there as well. Not going to have to be running for his life on several of those plays. But Mike, you said that you think that he can get to that 5,000 yard mark. I've got him well over that. I've got him at about just shy of 5,300 yards through the air this coming year. So I think that he's going to be electric. I've got him ranked right now as quarterback number 2 for this coming season. When it's all said and done, I think he'll be absolutely electric and do some amazing things. And he's a guy that if I'm sitting there on a super flex and he's on the board, I have a real tough time not pressing the draft button on that one. But in most cases, in most leagues, he's a guy that probably will not end up on my fantasy roster, just from the standpoint, again, he's got an ADP in the back of the second round. And usually I'm not looking to put my quarterback onto my roster until, the 5th, 6th round at the earliest in a single QB. And most of the time I'm looking to maybe take my first quarterback in that second round in super flex, but he'll already be gone. So guys, any other thoughts on Patrick Mahomes or the Chiefs in general? Cool. Alrighty, guys. Well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to head on over. We've got some wide receiver rankings to share with y'all. And what we've got going there, right? We've been kind of hinting at this all night, where we've got the wide receiver rankings. These are our consensus rankings. And Mike, it's on you to tell us what you agree with, what you don't agree with, and we'll rock and roll through there. And so Mike, we've got the first one, Tyreek Hill, followed up by Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, and Stefon Diggs round out the top 5, followed by DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, and Allen Robinson. So, Mike, what are your thoughts on our top 8 right there? That's one.
Oh, it was Mike. That was the first one. Mike, you're muted. That's one.
All right. So in my rankings, I need to update them a little bit, but my top 5 is exactly the same, but I have AJ Brown above Metcalf.
All righty.
Well, I'd say we came pretty close to hitting the mark there. All right.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yep. Moving on. Let's go ahead and we'll run through 9 through 16 for y'all. So number 9, we had Terry McLaurin. Number 10 was Justin Jefferson. Number 11 was Keenan Allen. Number 12 was Amari Cooper. Number 13 was DJ Moore. 14 was Mike Evans. 15 was CeeDee Lamb. And 16 was Chris Godwin. What are your thoughts on 9 through 16 there, Mike?
I am not in on Tampa Bay this year, partly because I just think he's going to spread the ball more. I think AB is going to get the ball more. I would put CeeDee Lamb ahead of both Evans and Godwin, and I have Jefferson above McLaurin. But other than that, I really like your guys' rankings.
Awesome sauce. Kevin, Alex, any thoughts on the rankings? Anything that you want to spill the beans on?
I don't know about spill the beans on. I feel pretty confident in it, right? The Tampa Bay thing, I think, is something that we were all kind of struggling with when going through and ranking these. But I just keep going back to a quarterback's second year in Bruce Arians' offense is just absolutely dynamite. Yes, you have AB who's going to be getting in there. You have OJ Howard who's back. There's a lot of mouths to feed in Tampa Bay, but Mike Evans being kind of the 6'3" touchdown hog, or the 6'4", touchdown hog that he is. And Godwin's really the best wide receiver currently on that team. AB's past his prime and everything else. So kind of my reasonings for that. But this top 16 is why I don't push panic on wide receivers, right? Like, this is why I draft so running back heavy, because I can start a team with damn near any one of these guys and I will be extremely comfortable with that. Definitely all these guys, probably inside the top 11. I think Cooper might be the breaking point where I'm not like absolutely comfortable, but I like the Cowboys offense so much this year that I'm generally okay with it. But as a whole, this is why I wait on wide receiver, because there's tons of talent in the wide receiver position that you can just get if you just sit back and wait.
So in other position groups, when we've done these positional rankings, there have been times where we slightly disagree on, what somebody is, what somebody's ranked. For our own personal rankings, and then we come up with the consensus for the good old boys. But to illustrate the point of how crazy good the wide receivers are this year, I'm just looking through it quickly here. I don't think all 3 of us agreed on any wide receiver position ranking when it comes down to it, at least through the top 12, probably through the top 20. I'm not sure that all 3 of us have the exact same position ranking for these wide receivers. So that illustrates the point of how good the wide receivers are this year and how spoiled you can be when it comes to taking wide receiver, and why you might be able to wait a little bit on receiver, because there is so much talent out there that you don't have to spend a ton of capital early, and you're still going to get a very good wide receiver, and just how wide the range is of what we think is actually going to be a wide receiver 1 versus a wide receiver 2. And it's a very slim margin between that. We were talking about how Travis Kelce is so much better than everybody else. That is not the case in the wide receiver room this year. That there is no clear cut number one, and there's really no clear cut number 1 through 12 or 12 through 24 or 24 through 36. It is very, very wide open in terms of what we're thinking might happen this year. So when you're looking at your draft board and you're trying to decide, it really kind of comes down to personal preference of which guys you want, what offense they're on, and how you want to get them and what you want to spend. But that just kind of shows you the wide array of how we all think of these wide receivers, that we didn't agree on any of them through the top 36, even, Derek.
Yeah, it was a wide range. Now there was a couple that we got close on.
Right.
You look at like
you and I had Tyreek 1,
Yep.
and Devin didn't have him as 1. Like that was a close one. But other than that, we didn't have anybody at the same level.
No, and even
anything.
looking through it, it was hard to find one where like two people agreed on the same rank for it. Like their wide receiver is one of those that it gives you so much parity, unlike a lot of these other positions where you typically see the consensus be very, very close to it. And I believe Kevin made the point earlier where, when you start talking like wide receiver, 35 through 50 type of thing, you're talking a very small amount of points that'll separate that over the course of a season, to the point where, you're talking maybe 1 or 2 points a game type of thing. And that's really what you're talking about here when you sit there and you start seeing some of these pools and these guys kind of grouped up here. And that's why we stress so heavily on talking about some of the tiers and drafting within the tiers and knowing where your tiers are. And oh, by the way, guess what we have coming for you guys over the next couple of weeks? We're going to be breaking down the tiers on the next couple of episodes coming up to help you guys get ready for draft season and really prepare for your redrafts going on there. But that is absolutely the thing. You're going to want to know where your tiers are and where your guys are within those tiers so you can draft that, because ultimately when you're talking inside those tiers, there's probably only going to be a couple of points. And in some cases, it's going to be like, 1 point per game type of thing that's going to separate these guys out on an average week to week basis type of thing. And knowing where those breaks are can ultimately make and break the draft for you and setting the foundation for your team. So, well, guys, any final thoughts on the wide receiver rankings here? Very cool. Guys, I do believe that that's going to take us down to the end of it. Want to give Mike a big shout out and a special thank you for coming on and, spending the time with us this evening. Mike, I know that you're at, Drop the Mike FF on Twitter and Instagram. If you can let the listeners know any other places that they can connect with you, view your work.
Yeah, Drop the Mike FF on Twitter, Instagram, SportsMe app, but you can also find my work over at goingfor2.com. And this summer I just started doing rankings as well, so you can find me there.
Awesome. Kevin, Alex, any final thoughts for the listeners?
Stay tuned to all the news, right? There's stuff going on a daily basis, whether it's injuries and another colt just broke its foot. So
I'm surprised they don't have the shotgun out there ready to put down all those horses.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, don't forget that fight that you were talking about at the beginning of the episode. Daniel Jones was on the bottom of the pile. Don't forget that.
Yes, he was. Yes,
he's on the bottom of the pile. Kenny Galladay tweaked his hammy. It looked like
there was a dude who got cut from the Panthers because he punched another guy in the head. Like stuff is going down.
Did you see that? Did you see that replay?
That guy, I didn't see the video, but I know the guy had to be like
check out the video
right?
because I get why they did it. Like the ball was up in the air. Kirkwood went through and went off his fingertips, but the guy just plain drilled him in the head with his shoulder and just dropped him. Like I understand why Matt Rule was so pissed off at him, and really kudos to the Panthers for letting this guy go. Obviously, if it was an all-pro safety, they wouldn't have done that. We understand that there's players that are scapegoats for messages being sent. This was one of those situations, but really kudos to the Panthers because there's no place in it. You guys are all out there fighting for roster spots, especially with these two guys. Like you're just trying to make a team and make a living, and you're in practice, y'all. Like don't be headhunting in practice. But
Save
being
that for the
said,
joint practices.
yes, the joint practices.
Well, the other big thing about that was Rule said after the practice that he talked to the leadership of the players and they agreed with him before they cut him. He talked to the top players on the team and wanted.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. Well, even better with him than talking to the leaders on the team. Like, they get it. Send the message.
Awesome. Well, guys, make sure that you hit us up next week. We're going to be live again, 11 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday night for the show. We've got the last team to break down, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're going to start getting into some of the tier breakdowns next week as well. If you haven't done so already, go over to YouTube, click the subscribe button, ring that little bell. Make sure that you're getting all the notifications for that. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Good Old Boys FF. We've got the website for you as well. We've got all of our rankings posted on there, goodoldboysff.com. But guys, I think that's going to bring us to the end of it for Kevin and Alex. I'm Derek. Special thanks to Mike for stopping by. Have a good one. Be safe.